Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be breaking down the news that the Jaguars have decided to place their franchise tag on Evan Engram, assuming they do not get a long-term deal done. So, this just broke for me about 15-20 minutes ago, pretty recent here. There's varying reports on how this is put out there. Some say that they have officially placed the franchise tag. However, I actually just got the notification on my phone that they are expected to place the franchise tag on him if there is not a long-term deal done. And regardless of either way, whichever situation it is, kind of the same thing we're talking about here. This is official news. We know that Evan Engram is going to either have the franchise tag or a long-term deal this next season. It's pretty clear, so we're going to talk about it. We're going to start off by just talking about how this impacts the cap, because I think that's the big deal with this. We all kind of figured he was going to be back, but how the franchise tag really plays into that. And so, as you see here, this is our salary cap situation at the moment. This puts in Evan Engram with the franchise tag. So the value for the franchise tag for a tight end this year is $11.345 million. This amount is fully guaranteed, so the Jaguars are on the hook to pay him this, but that guarantees that he can play for the team. Now, if they wanted to, they could decide to trade him. That's not going to happen, obviously, but that's an option out there. You can do that with players you tag, but you're going to expect him to probably get a long-term deal done at some point this season. It is possible it doesn't happen, but this is the expectation. And we'll get into that and kind of how that could look. After this move, out of the 51 men that we have counting against the roster right now, it saves you $5.5 million for this next season. That's your available cap space. Now, this doesn't factor in a few things. So this number will actually change a bit, positively actually, because although the Calvin Ridley reinstatement is not thrown in on this, it also doesn't consider that Shaquille Griffin will likely be a salary cap casualty. He'll be a player they're going to cut. So if we factor in both, see the cap shoots up. And like we do on all these videos, this is our placeholder for Calvin Ridley. And so that's his base salary. I already got it memorized at this point. I've put it in so many times. This is what your cap space is going to be looking like after those two moves. And those two moves are pretty much guarantees at this point that we know are going to happen. It's possible Shaquille Griffin could be traded instead, or maybe even they restructure, or no, don't restructure, but they change his deal to where they're paying him like a couple million this year on top of the $4 million that's against the books for what he's been paid before. That's possible, but not very likely. So there's a bit of money still available at this point, but the issue that we're going to really run into is that if you want to sign at least most of your free agents that you still have pending, you do not have the cap space to do it right now with the way this deal is structured, because you're putting more cap number on this season rather than putting it down the road if you have that long-term deal, because we could have seen this number be, say, $4 or $5 million. So there's less flexibility this season. That is something we want to know. And so I think what that's going to mean for this team is that either in the coming weeks or even down the road a little ways, I think we're going to see this team extend quite a few players. I think there's 3 guys we could look at that would make sense. One of them is obviously Evan Engram. We could see a long-term deal actually get done before the franchise tag would even be used. That's possible. And if it is, maybe they franchise tag Jawan Taylor to get a long-term deal done. That's also on the table. But Evan Engram is one of those players that we expect to potentially get a long-term deal. There are 2 other guys we've talked about on here before. One of them is Josh Allen. I think they would definitely consider that. and he's a player they're going to want to keep around. I can't really imagine him leaving. I don't think that's in the cards right now, and I think they're committed to him. And he's also a really young player still. He's only 26. He's got plenty of years ahead of him. He's a player who I think is still on the rise. And so I think that's another player you could see the Jaguars look to extend. And if they extended him, you're probably saving about $6 to $7 million. So similar to the Engram deal in what you save. You see even the cap numbers very close to each other. They're each like about 500,000 off of each other, and the deals they would be signing a little different. Josh Allen would be worth a little more, but kind of the same situation there. And then a small opportunity they might take advantage of, and I expect them to, is Jamal Agnew. He's got 1 year left on his deal. He's got a pretty big cap hit this year. I think he's someone they're going to keep around. We could see the Jaguars sign him to a long-term extension. Probably push a couple million down the road. Maybe a little more if they're going to add void years. I don't think that's the kind of player they put void years on, but it is possible. So those are players that we could really look at now for long-term deals. And one of them is going to have to be signed to a long-term deal unless the Jaguars are okay letting quite a few free agents walk. It's just the situation they're in, because as you're adding people on, your cap hit is smaller the first year, but it's still going to have a significant impact. Like Jawan Taylor, it's probably going to be a change of about $5 million against the cap, maybe $4 million if you're lucky, but that takes up like half your cap space. And then you got to consider that your rookies will add on a little bit, and you've got other players you want to bring back on this team. Maybe Marvin Jones. You got your two pass rushers in DeJuan Smoot and Arden Key. Andrew Wingard's a player you're going to want to bring back. You've got guys like that, and other people they might too, but they're not going to be huge cap impacts. And I also think this is a team that's going to have to try to spend a little bit in free agency, because they've at least got one hole that has to be addressed there. And I think that's cornerback. They've got to find someone. They've got to make sure when they're entering the draft that they have the ability to sign the best players onto their team. You know, you don't want to just be pigeonholed into one position. So I think one last thing I want to throw out before we kind of wrap this up. I think because of how this has happened, there's a chance to where if the Jaguars have not signed a long-term deal with Engram before the draft, let's imagine that the two sides are just a little far apart on what a deal would look like. I think it is in the cards now for the Jaguars to consider drafting a tight end still in the first round, or maybe even the second. I think it's possible. Now, if they sign Engram on to a long-term deal, I think it's a lot less likely. It is still possible because we saw them do it when they had Zach Ertz in Philadelphia under Doug Peterson. They even got a tight end who was really similar in Dallas Goedert. So you could see the Jaguars still do it in that scenario, but I think the chances are a lot higher with the way things are right now. So something to consider with the draft there. But as far as moves we're really looking at this point, you know, all these other players, it's just going to be normal deals. We're not going to see the franchise tag thrown around because it's already been used. And we can see a few guys getting extended to kind of clear up cap. This whole situation with Engram, to me, is very similar to what happened with Cam Robinson last year, where the team decided to franchise tag him and then worked out a long-term deal to free up cap space that they needed. It's a very similar situation, so that could be what we see here. And one last thing, on just a funny note, I think that Evan Engram needs to give us an apology, because I gotta tell you, watching him say he would like to play for the Kansas City Chiefs a couple days ago on Twitter, that scarred me. And I am very happy that he is not playing for the Kansas City Chiefs or another team like that. He even threw in the Giants on there. It's a very good thing that the Jaguars got him back. You don't want to see him go somewhere else. This is one of your best players on the team, a vital part of your offense, and sure as heck don't want to see him go to a team like the Chiefs. Not that the Chiefs would have even spent that money on him, but yeah, I think he needs to owe us an apology and give it pretty fast after that statement. But off of that somewhat comical note to finish this off, that's all I've got for this video. We'll probably go into more detail on all this stuff in the future, but hey, this is breaking news. We're going to talk about it quick. We're going to get into the important parts of it. And so I appreciate you watching this video. I appreciate you supporting this channel. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Jags.